This budget, again, represents, in dollars, $500 million more in spending than the current budget, and that current budget includes $1.5 billion that didn't even come from the people of Minnesota. So $2 billion more of the people's money from the state of Minnesota is going into this budget than in the one we're currently under in HHS. $2 billion more are going into our budget that's on the table from the state of Minnesota, people of the state of Minnesota, from the current budget we are in. And to have that be described as cruel and draconian and bad, I find that hard to believe. Certainly we can agree that it would be great if we had a lot more money, or if we could have the freedom of not having to do things the way the federal government tells us to do them. It would be wonderful, but we don't live in that world. We live in the world that has the constraints that it has. And so we have to do the best we can with what we have, and that's frankly what we do in our personal lives. We do it in our business lives. Every church, synagogue, congregation, charity does the same thing. They have hundreds and thousands of requests for assistance, and they don't meet everyone. They don't meet everyone that comes through the door because they can't. And they make decisions, and they say, well, we're going to help this person or this family or this group, and we just can't do this. And it's not because they're cruel or bad people. It's because they don't have the resources, they don't have the time, they don't have the infrastructure, they may not have the funds, but they make choices. And we in Minnesota as a state have to do the same, and we have asked the people of this state to pay taxes, and we do pay a lot of taxes. We are one of the highest tax states in the country. And the top 1% of income earners in this state pay into the state coffers 25% of the money that we spend. 1%. The top 1% of the earners pays 25% of the revenues that come into the state of Minnesota. Top 10% is 43%. So what we're saying is we've got, in the general population out there in the society, you've got 10% of the people that are funding half of the spending in the state. So if you look at that in the terms of this budget, 10% of the people of the state of Minnesota are paying half of this budget, almost half. And some say that's not enough, that they ought to pay more. They ought to pay more than half. Maybe they ought to pay 60% or 70%. Maybe they ought to pay the whole thing. I don't know. But to suggest that that's somehow not paying their fair share, I don't think that that holds water. The fact is, this budget represents a significant increase in spending from dollars from the people of the state of Minnesota over the current budget, significant, almost 25% more. And yes, it doesn't match the projected growth, but remember that projected growth is a forecast, and where did that forecast come from? You had people in the departments, and they said, well, we're going to make estimates, and we're going to say there's going to be some additional people here, and we'll add that in, and then we're going to have a factor of some kind of what they call inflationary cost growth attached to those increase in numbers. We're going to do the math, and we multiply it out, and you end up with a number. And that's what we call the forecast. And once that number, that forecast gets identified, somehow that becomes a magical real number. And all it is a forecast based on some assumptions that may or may not be very realistic, that may have built into it things that are unreal. And I looked at the specific forecasts in various areas of this budget with the department, and they said they would show that, well, half of the projected growth in this particular area is related to increase in numbers of people, and the other half is related to what they called inflationary or some other kind of, what is that? What is it? What are the cost drivers that are causing that 50% in addition to the actual number of people served that is causing that to go up? We don't know. It's hard to find out. These budgets are not very transparent. It's very, very difficult. It's very complicated, and people, and I know Senator Berglund knows this and others know this, it's very, very difficult. So my point is simply that we have done, I believe, a good job of setting some priorities, as I pointed out, of trying to find a way to sustain health care for the low-income people of the state of Minnesota, and frankly, Minnesota Care is not sustainable. It is going to run out of money soon. It does not pay reimbursement rates at commercial rates for people who receive services in Minnesota Care, or Medicaid for that matter. Minnesota Care has an upper end maximum payout of $10,000, and it costs the people of the state of Minnesota about $6,000 per year per person to get that $10,000 benefit. That's not a great deal. And I believe we can do better. And part of that doing better is creating a structure that allows individuals to make decisions, because that's where you get efficiencies and savings, when you get people who are making choices. And it drives a marketplace to allow those choices to be made. And we have to do that. We have to do that. And so, members, I'm not going to say this is a perfect bill. I'm not going to say we couldn't have made different choices or made better choices. I'm sure we could have. But there was no alternative budget proposed in this body. We have met the criteria that we established of trying to create sustainable change, reform. We have talked about the need to try to challenge the structure and relationship with the federal government. That's in the bill. And we've talked about living within the resources that we have, that again represents a significant increase in spending from current levels. Significant increase in spending. So members, I would urge your support and ask us to pass the bill.